30th. And let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Okay, I want to remind the public to fill out a request to speak form if they're interested in speaking. I have a number of them already, and we'll get to public comment in just a minute. Let's start with roll call, though. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera.
Here.
Commissioner McNulty. Here. Commissioner Sturts.
Here.
We have a quorum, and I'd like to acknowledge that we have a court reporter today, Michelle, so everyone be sure to speak one at a time. And for the public, if you would please spell your names for the record, that would be very helpful for the court reporter so she gets an accurate transcription. I also would like to acknowledge our counsel today, Mary O'Grady, who is here. And I believe those are my announcements. So let's move to agenda item 2, which is call for public comment. And I'm just going to start in the order these are sitting here now. And please come up to the microphone, as I mentioned, and state your name and spell it if you could. I'd like to also request that the public limit comments, if they could, to 3 minutes each so we can get through the meeting as efficiently as possible. First person is Representative Daniel Peterson. He's the state rep for LD 29 Tucson. He's representing himself. The subject is competitive districts.
Daniel Patterson.
Thank you, members of the commission. I'm Representative Daniel Patterson from here in Tucson, and I was planning on just showing up here to listen. I first want to thank the commissioners for doing an important job for the state of Arizona. And I wanted to also thank you on behalf of myself and my constituents here in Tucson. Thank you for coming to Tucson, listening to what people have to say in southern Arizona. I think that we are all interested in competitive districts, making sure that everyone's vote counts and really focuses on making sure our districts reflect what's going on in our state. And so I appreciate that you're doing the job, and mostly just want to say welcome to Tucson and good luck with the process and hopefully creating competitive, fair districts across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kenneth Moyes, representing Citizens for Common Sense Redistricting. The subject is Commission Missions and Arizona Constitution.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You hear me okay? Yeah. Kenneth Moyes, M-O-Y-E-S. Members of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. On June 24th, you heard compelling reasons why Strategic Telemetry was a highly partisan company with stated objectives to ensure progressivism. They clearly do not have a balanced objective and do not take a clinical approach to their work. The Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission's mission is to administer the fair and balanced redistricting of the congressional and legislative districts for the state of Arizona. Yet on Wednesday, June 29th, the Commission voted to select Strategic Telemetry to draw Arizona's districts. I can understand the vote of the Democrats on the Commission, but the vote of the chair, Ms. Mathis, is puzzling. She is quoted as saying she voted for this vendor because they worked the campaign of Mayor Bloomberg of New York City, an independent. May I remind Ms. Mathis that she was told on Friday that this vendor chose the Bloomberg campaign for the following reason, based on a quote from the president of the vendor, Mr. Strasma. Bloomberg's decision to switch his party affiliation to independent, and that was from Republican, and its progressive positions on most issues was what led many Democratic consultants, including my firm, Strategic Telemetry, to support him. It is Ms. Mathis' vote for a heavily and clearly partisan firm and ignoring compelling evidence and comment that smacks of a highly partisan chair or an incapable chair. We call for Ms. Mathis to be served written notice in preparation for removal by the governor. Article 4, Part 2, Section 1, Paragraph 10 of our state constitution states, after having been served written notice and provided with an opportunity for a response, a member of the Independent Redistricting Commission may be removed by the governor with the concurrence of 2/3 of the Senate for substantial neglect of duty, gross misconduct in office, and inability to discharge the duties of the office. It is clear that Ms. Mathis neglected her duty to administer the fair and balanced redistricting of the congressional and legislative districts for the state of Arizona. She has demonstrated an inability to discharge the duties of office, thus grounds for dismissal. We ask that members of the commission, legislators, or the governor serve Ms. Mathis with this written notice. Obtain her answer, and if found insufficient, the governor remove her from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David Cashin, representing CCSR, and the subject is the letter of the law. And if you could state what CCSR is.
Ms. Mathis, before you begin, I want to make sure that the people in the audience, no laughing. I appreciate that. I mean, no laughing. If you find something funny, keep it to yourself or go outside. So just respect the people that are in this room. So, thank you.
CCR is just loosely Citizens for Common Sense of Redistricting. My name is David Cashin, C-A-S-H-I-O-N, and I just ask that you guys consider the Constitution, consider 106, and consider the voting laws. I mean the voting rights law. If you want to look at keeping communities together, that's perfectly within your bounds. But to go and look at strengthening or keeping somebody's strength, their position in their district strong, that's not what your job is. To go and look at historical voting records to decide, there's nowhere in any that I can find anywhere that gives you the right to do that. So I just ask that you just stick to the letter of the law, plain and simple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Vicki Davis, representing SELF and CCSR, and the subject is questions on procedures.
My name is Vicki Davis, D-A-V-I-S. I've been trying to find the proposals of the various companies, and I can't find them. I don't know if other citizens have been able to find them so that we could know what you were considering. Hello?
There you go.
Hello?
That's fine.
Okay.
That works.
And I've been trying to find the minutes. I attended the meeting yesterday, but because you were in executive session for 3 hours, I had to leave before I could hear the results, and so I just had to Google somewhere else. I couldn't find it on your website. I question why you make your meetings available to us with such short notice, and that you have no meetings scheduled in the evening so ordinary working citizens have a chance to have some input. I don't understand why you had to have a three-hour executive session. You evidently are supposed to do that if you're choosing individuals, not a vendor, and in this case it was a vendor, or if you're getting legal opinions, and if it took 3 hours to get a legal opinion, you have a really bad lawyer. You said that in the reports that I read on the internet, said that all companies are political. So why on earth did you choose the most political company? In this economy, why did you choose a Wisconsin, Washington, D.C. based company? I know my husband had a small company, a civil engineering company, and I know when he submitted proposals, he couldn't compete with big companies. And he knew, and I knew, and the city knew, and whoever he sent proposals to knew that the most slick, fancy, detailed proposal isn't necessarily always the best one. I really don't trust what you've done so far because it's been so hard to find, to know ahead of time when your meetings are, and to find records. I've never seen an organization that didn't have minutes approved and so forth. So I just suggest that you need to have more consideration for the ordinary citizens to keep track of what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next speaker is Don Nevins. The title of his organization, Men of the Bean, and the subject is Mapping Company Independence/Integrity.
Men of the Bean is a coffee group. I spoke before in Phoenix.
Good to hear you.
I spoke before to this committee
Close, even
in
closer.
Phoenix. Is that close enough? How about that? Can we hear now? I'm still on the same topic, and I appreciate the ability to speak to the commission. Independent, fair, unbiased redistricting. Washington, D.C., nobody in the district has the respect of Arizona voters. Congress is at 20%. The administration is at 46%. The district mayor is in disrepute. The lobbyists and vendors are in disrepute. And you pick a mapping company from D.C.? This independent commission not only has appeared to fail the voters of Arizona in maintaining a fair and balanced reputation, it has in fact deliberately chosen a mapping company whose CEO has a highly biased reputation. Obama's campaign national target director. In conclusion, I'm outraged. This is treating the citizens fairly? No.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ed Johnson, representing Self, and the subject is objective. And Mr. Johnson, if you wouldn't mind stating where you live, or just so, and actually that's for anyone who speaks that just puts Self, it would be helpful just to know in what area you reside.
His name is Edward J. Johnson. That's E-D-W-A-R-D, middle initial J, J-O-H-N-S-O-N. I live at 5160 North Sabino Foothills Drive, which is in 85750 up by Sabino Canyon. It's in the county. And I won't take a lot of your time because more eloquent people have already expressed pretty much my feelings, but I'm just here to object to the lack of objectivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Our next speaker is Bill Rowe, representing Self and competitive districts. And just to clarify, you don't have to give your full address or anything. I was just looking for if you live in Tucson or Oro Valley or Marana or wherever.
I'm Bill Rowe, and I live in the city of Tucson, and I was one of the pool of 25 applicants to be on this commission. I was disappointed, of course, that I was not selected, but I think I recognize more than most people the amount of time, energy, and effort that each of you put into this. It is an enormous commitment to the future of the state of Arizona. My own interest is particularly in competitive districts, and then a little more selfishly for Pima County in southern Arizona, my interest is to make sure the interests of this part of the state are adequately protected in the final results. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Gary Gomez, representing SELF, and subject is decision on mapping.
See if I can get this right first time. Gary Gomez, G-A-R-Y-G-O-M-E-Z. I live in Tucson, Arizona. Madam Chairman, Commissioners, I'm a citizen who is now questioning the Commission's integrity and commitment to inclusion of the public in a nonpartisan process. After attending the last two meetings, my feelings are that this is a predetermined process with one agenda: remap Arizona to improve democratic representation, code word competitive districts. So much for transparency, meeting behind closed doors, and now a mapping company that will draw districts back in D.C. and New York and return them to the state. Will David Axelrod be invited to approve the maps? Well, how would we know? The maps are going to be drawn out of state. What really saddens me is that in this economy, you're sending our money out of state. We had two companies that were Arizona firms. So we get less input, less transparency, out-of-state mapping by a company that doesn't understand the differences, nuances in our population. But that apparently isn't important. This commission has its own agenda, an agenda that disregards its own RFP, its own mandate, and any resemblance to being nonpartisan. The winners will clearly be the Obama 2012 campaign, the DNC, two clients of this mapping company, Arizona Democrats, and of course the attorneys. Let the lawsuits begin. You better get back to the legislature and ask for more money. You have guaranteed more lawsuits than less. Lawsuits may begin before you even start drawing maps. Oh, that may be incorrect. Just like this decision, maybe the maps are already drawn. There are a number of them floating around from Democratic groups. I've seen some maps out there. It will be interesting to see if in the final analysis, these maps will be the ones that are accepted with mere cosmetic changes. The losers are clearly the citizens of Arizona, Arizona economics by sending our money out of state, and confidence in this nonpartisan process. I started attending these meetings with no agenda, not looking for a win for the R's or who are the majority in Arizona, just looking for the mandate to be fulfilled, an independent, nonpartisan commission. Silly me, partisan politics are alive and well. This brings to mind the quote made by the commander of the successful Japanese fleet after their attack on Pearl Harbor. I'm afraid all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ginny Crawford. Title is Campaign Manager for People of Arizona, and the subject is Mapping Company.
Ginny Crawford, G-I-N-I, Crawford, C-R-A-W-F-O-R-D, and I live in Marana. And I want to say right now, forgive me, I'm not going to use niceties because I am so upset over this situation. I have heard the board is stacked against Republicans, 3-2, and the voting and all this. But I have thought I'm going to give them a break. You know, things can be passed around, rumors and stuff, but the end product has not been done. So I thought I'm going to give you all a break. And then I heard today that you picked a mapping company that is a campaign company. And I understand campaign companies. I have one. I am a political campaign manager, and I own a political campaign company. And this is what this company is. It's not a mapping company. It's a political campaign consulting company. And if that isn't bad enough, it's a Democratic campaign consulting company. And as people will say, Obama's one of their clients. You know, all all of you knew this, because I went to their website, and this company doesn't hide anything. I mean, it's very transparent. So I really give that to this company. But on their front page, they tell you it is a campaign company. And they explain how they can help your campaign do things better. I have their front page right here. I mean, anyone can clearly see it's a political campaign company. And then you go on in this website, and they're clear. They're transparent. They tell you that their clients are progressive Democrats, as I just said, Obama being one of them. The whole, like I said, all of you knew this. You know, I thought this commission was supposed to be nonpartisan. Damn it, you can't get any more partisan than this, and I hope you got that. I am so mad over this. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, she's Ruth McClung's campaign manager, and she's Republican. If they would have picked a campaign company that was Republican, she wouldn't be standing here. She wouldn't be whining. But that is wrong, because I am American. And if we don't do these districts unbiased, if we don't draw these districts all over America unbiased, and then we have lost this country as we know it. And this country won't be representing the people. It will be representing a small interest. There are many mapping companies out there. Sorry, I am so upset. That you could have picked that are non-political. Why didn't you?
Our next speaker is Lynn Wildblood, and she's representing Wild Ridge HOA, and the subject is mapping selection. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Wildblood.
Name is Wildblood, W-I-L-D-B-L-O-O-D. First name is Lynn, L-Y-N-N. Colleen, I have your comments that you had posted. And I have a few comments about it, and it has to do with something that you already have been hearing about. You made a few comments about, I understand there are partisan feelings and passions, which obviously there are. But when you talk about the firms, you had made mention of the fact that it sure would have been good that there were possibly two firms. Well, I'm going to suggest to you, what's wrong with having two firms that would work together? It's a good possibility. That's about all, because you've already heard a lot of the comments by other people in regards to this decision. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wildblood. Our next speaker is Keith Rawlinson, representing Self, and the subject is Choice of Redistricting Company.
My name's Keith Rawlinson. It's R-O-L-L-I-N-S-O-N. Live in Tucson. I was going to get up and ask you guys, basically direct a question to you, the chair, basically the same question everybody's been asking. What motivated you guys to choose these people? Because it's just obvious what they're doing. But there's no sense in asking that question because it's pretty obvious to me why you did.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rick Meyer, representing a private citizen, and the subject is fair elections.
Hello, my name is Rick Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. I live in Tucson. Been a long time Tucson resident, but more importantly, I'm an American. I've been following this issue online for a little while. I've usually kept my opinion to myself for the most part, but I feel it's important to have you hear my opinion on this. Choosing a vendor that has so many obvious Democratic ties tends to give an appearance of bias and impropriety almost. This is such an important issue with such long-term, long-lasting results that it seems like a company that would be a little more nonpartisan would have been chosen. It concerns me in that respect, and it concerns me that the decisions made are going to be lasting until the next census. So I'm just a little disappointed, and I wanted to voice my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christine Bauserman, title representing Tanque Verde Valley CCSR, and the subject is LD30.
Yes.
Is that right? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
It's Christine with the CH and B as in boy, AUSERMAN. I live in LD30.
And can you state what CCSR is? Sorry.
That common sense redistricting. I live in LD30 in the far northeast valley, and I want to talk about communities of interest and where I would like LD30 lines to be. LD30 has to lose a small amount of votes, and you can do that easily by moving Houghton Road, the line out to Houghton Road between Speedway and 22nd Street. You can lose the southwest area to LD25 and give everything west of Sabino Canyon to LD26, which actually they have more in common with that community. What makes us a community in Tanque Verde? One is natural boundaries. We are like a rural suburban area out there. Most of our homes are 1 acres to 3 acres. We are connected by Houghton Road, Old Spanish Trail, and recently Marianne Cleveland. And then we all know all the little back roads to get to each other because there's a lot of dirt roads out there. We do have the windy roads and the narrow roads, and our kids ride mini bikes and bicycles, and we raise animals out there. I sit in my house and horses ride by with these areas. We are in 4-H, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I moved out there to be near my charter school. We do these activities with people in these same areas. We're in 4-H with people from Sierra Vista, Vale, Rita Ranch, and Saurita. We don't see people from FFA, from Saguaro High School, or any of the other high schools. Like I said, our kids raise these animals on our land out there. We hike around there. We have that in common. I go out my door and I hike in Molina Basin. I go to the end of Fort Lowell Speedway. I go down Old Spanish Trail and hike. We hike like that mountain and that part of the mountain. We don't come into the foothills area. We know each other. We see each other's on the hiking trail, and we know you live somewhere in the neighborhood. Then we see each other later at the grocery store. We exercise out there at the same clubs, and it's actually become a topic amongst us. Like, we'll see each other and be, where do I know you, or what do I know you from? And we stop trying to limit it, and we're like, okay, we live in Tanque Verde. That's all you need to say. So, I would like to make an additional comment. Is Steve Moritor with the Egalitarian seems to get information before it's published on your website. Like Sunday night, very late, he said that you were going to move the meeting to Phoenix on Wednesday. And I don't know what his connection is. He is a blogger. But he does seem to get some information that he puts out there before you guys even put it out there for the public. And he also seems, so it makes it appear that he has an inside connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Beverly Lockwood, representing LD30. The subject is Tanque Verde Valley.
Yes, it's Beverly Lockwood, Lockwood. I live in the Tanque Verde Valley area. I could mimic everything Christine Bowserman just said, so you can take that on the record. What I was thinking sitting here listening was, if you all haven't already let the contract to hire this company, would you take our comments into consideration and go back to your drawing board and try to get somebody that better represents us in Arizona? We have plenty of representation for the company that you've hired. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn St. Angelo, representing SELF, and the subject is choice.
I am Lynn St. Angelo. It is spelled Lynnest_Angelo. And I have been not going to do this. Someone pointed it out to me a long time ago. But now I feel that based on what happened yesterday, I have been compelled to now bring the Declaration of Independence into what is happening on the Commission. When our founding fathers penned the Declaration of Independence, there were 27 things that they had as objections to what King George had done. These were things they considered so egregious to them that they were actually willing to lay down their lives and their fortunes to withdraw from Great Britain. And what they said is, the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let these facts be submitted to a candid world. One of these facts is this: he has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Now, you have changed your venue. You have changed last minute. You have been down to the very minute of being the 48 hours that you're required by law to give, to change from one city to the next, to have people go all over. And up to now, I've been saying, well, you know, things come up. But I know in fact that you knew a week ahead of the Oro Valley meeting, and you didn't let the public know about it until 48 hours before. Your charge to the Oro Valley Town Council was that your mission is to administer the fair and balanced redistricting of congressional and legislative districts of the state of Arizona. That's your own stated mission. And in your RFP, in hiring this contracting company that you just hired to draw all the maps in Arizona, you said, all clearly state the prominence of public input, that the contractor shall be responsible for complying and soliciting public input, as well as providing the public with information as directed by the AIRC, including such items as draft maps and other relevant information. That same thing is true of the Commission. You are required by law to listen to us, the public. You have been hearing from us, the public, week after week. Even yesterday, I was streaming your meeting. There were more people telling you about strategic telemetry and how this, of all the companies, had the greatest conflict of interest and should be ousted. If it was a legal situation and this was a lawyer or a judge sitting on a thing, he would have to recuse himself. That's how bad they are. Yet that is who you choose. This is blatant. What has been done is a blatant disregard of what we said. And I want to know why. What faith can we possibly have that you will be fair and balanced? You aren't being now. You haven't listened to us, not one bit. It hasn't been one person. There have been many people representing many groups. So slanted have your votes been against Republicans that there is no question what the goal of this commission is. But what can we expect when the independent is not really an independent? She's married to an activist Democrat who is treasurer for Nancy Young Wright's campaign. You're not listening to the public now. How can you possibly think that we believe that you will listen to us in drawing maps, fair and balanced maps? How could we possibly believe you?
Our next speaker is Raquel Cook, representing SELF, and the subject is fairness.
My name is Raquel Cook.
Thank you.
Raquelcook. I live in Oro Valley. And I would just like to say, in the interest of time, I am strongly in favor of everything that Lynn, St. Angelo, and others have just stated. So I will not go into it in detail, other than on the record, I am 100% behind everyone who has complained about your selection of the mapping company and the question as to how truly independent this commission is. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frank Oliveri, representing Pima County Tea Party Patriots. The subject is mapping transparency.
How's that? All right. Frank Olivieri, Olivieri. I live in Pima County. And I guess I'm going to say what others have said. I've had a history teacher way back when that told me when you go and we discuss politics, back in high school many years ago, I said, but make sure you put on a public record. So I'm going to say it again. Shame on the three of you that voted for strategic telemetry. Your decision clearly shows that there is nothing independent about this decision. It's purely based on political ideology. The record of prior AIRC open meetings will show that the public's concerns of strategic telemetry fell on deaf ears. Strategic Telemetry is a company that's primary function is political and not mapping. Let me read from their website. Quote, Strategic Telemetry is dedicated to providing individual level micro-targeting data analysis, strategic consulting, and other services to help enable campaigns to successfully reach their target audiences and have their messages heard. In today's evolving landscape, where each vote is more important than ever, making sure that your campaign is running efficiently and effectively as possible is critical to your success. Whether your campaign's needs are big or small, contact us today to learn how we can provide custom solution for your outreach management needs. Then they go on to state, in addition to micro-targeting, Strategic Telemetry offers many of our valuable services to progressive campaigns and organizations, including campaign maps, campaign plans, mapping, redistricting, analysis support, and so forth. It is an independent position. Is this an independent position? I don't think so. Arizona Central reported this morning on Chairwoman Mathis' response as follows. Commissioner Chairwoman Colleen Mathis, an independent, said none of the applicant firms were free from partisan connections because that's typical for work in the political and elections arenas. Where Strasma has done most of his homework for Democrats, he has proven expertise, and commissioners will strive to tap the expertise but not defer to it, she said. This is not a shy group. Thank you for that. With highly skilled consultants in transparent processes, any dissatisfaction can at least be minimized. Now, here is Ken Strasma in his own words in February 2010. Again, Bloomberg's decision to switch party affiliation to independent and his progressive positions on most issues was what led to Democratic consultants, including my firm, Strategic Telemetry, to support him, unquote. Chairwoman Mathis, what part of blatant partisan politics don't you understand? He states his political bias toward the progressive Democratic agenda. It has been documented to this commission before that Ken Strasma, president of the Strategic Telemetry, was the national target director for Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. Time out. How much more politically motivated information do you need? He's the president of his company. He is a major influence in the strategic direction his employees will take in this assigned task. Finally, Chairwoman Mathis, it should be noted once again of your affiliation with your husband's campaign treasurer for Democratic House Representative 2010 campaign of Nancy Young Wright. The public has spoken, and you refuse to listen. Are you really independent? Of the 4 mapping finalists, there was at least one that had no prior bias and is an Arizona company with a Democrat and Republican owner. Terra Systems Southwest, a Tucson-based company, represents Arizona and not the interest of Washington, and the money stays in Arizona. I'm ashamed.
Our next speaker is Peter, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, Bankson, and you'll have to tell us who you're representing. The subject is competitive districts.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Probably need to raise it.
Thank you for helping with that.
All right. My name is Peter Bankson. It's B-E-N-G-T-S-O-N. I live up in the Catalina foothills. I'm representing myself. I'm here to speak on competitive districts. I believe that's important. The districts that we have should be competitive. I also would like to say that this is the first time I've been to one of these meetings. And I'm a member of the public, and I think you guys are doing all right. Just keep up what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carolyn Cox. Carolyn Cox, and our title is President of the Tucson Conservative Forum, and the subject is fairness.
Yes, my name is Carolyn Cox. It's C-A-R-O-L-Y-N-C-O-X. I declare that the Redistricting Commission was improperly chosen because Ms. Mathis should not have been considered as a valid independent, since her husband was the treasurer of the Nancy Young Wright, who's a Democrat, campaign in the 2010 election. You are not independent.
Our next speaker is Don Woolley, retired engineer, and the subject is mapping.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Don Woolley, W-O-O-L-L-E-Y, from Sarita, Arizona. I have 2 inputs for the Commission today. First, I want to introduce a map that I produced using some different software. I've drawn the 9th congressional districts for the state with the supporting data, and all validated and per the Proposition 106 criteria. So I'm not quite sure how to submit this to the Commissioners. I did fax it to you yesterday. Don't know if you got it or not. But I have a copy of that presentation available if you want me to leave it with someone today. Secondly, of course, the big topic this morning is the consultant that you chose. Obviously, everybody's using their baseball bat. This morning, the big news, the Commission selected Strategic Telemetry as their mapping consultant, a Washington, D.C. based firm led by Ken Strasma, with progressive ties to several activist efforts around the country, including the current effort to recall state senators and even the governor in the state of Wisconsin. This is a company that lists redistricting as one of 16 services provided, most of which are political in nature. From an article, Winning Campaigns, on micro-targeting, which is one of Ken Strasma's specializations. Ken Strasma is president of Strategic Telemetry, an organization specializing in micro-targeting and other strategic consulting services for progressive campaigns and organizations. I think it's pretty clear where he stands. In my opinion, Ken Strasma's company would have been the fourth best choice of the four, based only on the facts on the public record for each company, and not on any fancy words and promises in their presentations. I think the audience is tired of fancy words and fancy presentations. I myself am not convinced, and many others are not convinced, unlike your chairwoman, Colleen Mathis, and the two Democrats, that Ken Strasma and his firm will contribute unbiased input to this commission. I do not believe him for a minute. If you do, then I have some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you. Ultimately, the commission will make the decisions on mapping, and I submit that transparency is paramount with regards to this consulting firm's inputs to you. Thanks for your time. I hope you look at my map.
And I should have acknowledged Mr. Bladines, our executive director, and you please submit any information or documentation to him. Our next speaker is Ed Slentz, representing SELF, and the subject is Choice of Strategic Telemetry.
My name is Ed Slentz. Last name is S as in Sam, L-E-N-T-Z. And I live in Oro Valley. I have a question and then some comments. Question is the cost-benefit analysis available for the public to review on the choice of strategic telemetry?
I would ask our legal counsel about that question.
Right now, since we're in this sort of open public comment phase, the commission is not really to do anything and respond to criticism, refer things.
So it's not available for the public to see what the cost-benefit until after it's done. And just one other question. Was the contract let yesterday? Was the contract let yesterday?
At this point, this is just your time to make comments. And then if you have additional questions, you can follow up with staff after.
Well, I'll make a comment about that. I'm very, very upset that this panel would consider that no one in the state of Arizona is capable of redistricting, that you would have to go out of state to Washington to get people in here to do that job. Recognizing the type of company that strategic telemetry is, how in the world could you consider them? Reason why I'd like to see the cost-benefit analysis of how you came to that conclusion, because I'm not sure there's something funny that's going on here. A company outside of the state, not in the state, winning an award, there usually has to be some very, very significant reasons why that company is selected. My next comment would be, if you have let the contract, I wrote contracts for a major aerospace company for 30 years and administered those contracts. You can issue a stop work notice immediately. You can issue a cessation of work notice. I would urge you to do that, to reconsider public input. It is very apparent to me, and I thought you were required to listen and consider public input. You have done none of that. And if you need help writing a cessation of work or stop work notice, let me know. I'll be happy to do that for you.
Our next speaker is Mona Mayring, and again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing, you can let us know. And then from PC 227, representing Chula Vista Villas HOA, the subject is Independent Fair Commission.
Thank you. Mona, M as in mother, O-N-A, Moring, M as in mother, O-E-H-R-I-N-G. We're here today because of Proposition 106, and it starts off by saying the purpose of this commission is to prevent gerrymandering. It goes on in this law to say that every member of this commission, that it is to be fair, balanced, honest, and independent. The law goes on to list the word independent 28 times. I can't even begin to tell you how many times impartial comes into it. And yet, you have sat there in these meetings and previous meetings taking no regard to the input of the people. I just say this. I think it's time that you admit you made a mistake with the map person and just go back to the drawing board. We would respect you if you admit your mistake.
Our next speaker is Cheryl Lamona, representing Overlook Group. Subject is mapping.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the Commission again, and also to provide the correct spelling of our names, as it will enable our resident blogger to more efficiently research what social networks we all belong to. Much as we were concerned with your attorney selection, the Overlook Group was appalled to learn of yesterday's decision to hire Strategic Telemetry as its mapping consultant. Clearly, there were other options that would not lead the public to conclude that the Commission has a political bias, but you chose to ignore our concerns. Yesterday's Rasmussen poll from the week ending June 26th indicates that 68% of Americans believe that our country is heading in the wrong direction. Citizens are especially concerned with the economy, unemployment, the new health care law, and our need to develop domestic gas and oil resources. The most recent Zogby poll from April indicates that only 38% of those polled think the president deserves to be reelected. And according to June opinion polls, voter approval of Congress's performance continues to fall. The Gallup poll indicates that only 17% of Americans approve of the job that Congress is doing, while Rasmussen reports that number to be only 8%. In that same Rasmussen poll, the view that congressmen are corrupt has remained in the 36 to 45% range since January of 2010. Moving to the Arizona state level, in January of this year, the Arizona Republic broke down the percentage of Arizona registered voters as 31.6% Democrat, 35.8% Republican, and 31.66% other. As an independent, Chairwoman Mathis seeks to represent that independent group. But how is that accomplished? By voting for a mapping consultant with strong ties to the Democrat Party. Perhaps voters are changing party affiliation to independent because of their dissatisfaction with the current administration and Congress. So why select a consultant with an agenda that will likely support the Democratic Party in terms of realignment? We would be remiss if we didn't express our concerns with the partisan direction this Redistricting Commission has taken. We certainly hope that Strategic Telemetry's use of social media to involve the public in the mapping process results in the Commission finally listening to some public concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dee Pfeiffer, representing Vail residents. The subject is mapping.
Good afternoon. It's DEE and then PFEIFFER. And this is my first time to ever speak, so I'd like to change who I'm representing to self. Oh. But I am from Vail, and I don't think many have come up from Vail to these meetings. This is my first meeting, not because most of them have been held in Phoenix, but rather because of the last-minute changes. Sorry. So I would hope in the future, I know you're probably busier than I am, but being able to schedule yourself further out than 48 hours, I would hope would be something that you would at least try to do in the future so that I and many others that I know will have time to schedule it. Let's see. To the most casual observer, the Strategic Telemetry Company is extremely partisan and results cannot be considered fair by any standard. I won't repeat what they have on their Facebook account because it's been said here many, many times, And I would just send out a big ditto to Ms. Crawford's points and also to Lynn St. Angelo's points. I absolutely agree with them. I want to express my skepticism about the true independent status of this commission due to research that I've done and I've heard other people have done in regards to Chairman Mathis. Since you as a committee have not listened to the Arizonans so far at these meetings about the fairness of this committee, the members, the selection of the attorneys, and now the mapping company, I just don't see how the outcome can be fair by any stretch of anyone's imagination. I just hope that you'll listen to us, and if you can remedy any of the decisions that have been made so far, that you will do that. We're just looking for a fair commission, fair mapping going into the next election. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Can we get some water? Can we, and me too. Water. Yeah. Thank you. Our next speaker is Peyton Davies, representing Sun City Vistoso. Subject is firm chosen to draw lines.
Hi, my name is Peyton Davies. That's Payton Davies, and I live in Oro Valley. And I hadn't planned to speak, but I think I'm one of the people that have been awakened. I don't consider myself a giant, but with all the people with like minds, we are getting awake. And when I first heard, but I am also, I keep up with things. I think I would be much more involved if I weren't up to here with things at home in my personal life. But this was enough to get me down here today. And when I first heard about the composition of the committee, I thought to myself that it was just hysteria on some people's, emails, that it was a little bit over the top. But the more I looked into it and the more I've heard, I don't believe it's an independent commission. I don't believe that the chairman is truly an independent. I can't say that. I don't know what's in your heart, but your decisions show otherwise. Now, as far as the mapping company, everything's been said. The thing that outrages me the most is the fact that it's not an Arizona company. This state could use the business. We need to keep the money here. We don't need to do what Raul Grijalva did last year and call a boycott on Arizona and send our business to Washington, D.C. We need to keep the money in Arizona. And I know, and I know that people revisit decisions all the time. And I don't think any of this has been written in stone yet. And I would like to ask respectfully that you revisit the decision of the company that you picked to do the mapping for redistricting. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alex Bissett. He's a professional engineer. Title is, representing Sun City Vistoso. Subject is mapping company selection.
That's close enough.
Sorry.
Alex, A-L-E-X, Bissett, B-I-S-S-E-T-T, Oro Valley, Arizona. I'll be very brief because all the stuff I wrote down has been said before. But there were a couple of things that jolted me in the last 24 hours. One was a phone call I got last night telling me about the decision of this commission. What came to mind was this is the worst decision I've heard in years since O.J. Simpson was acquitted. Now I have a very simple question to ask the chairman, or Chairman Mathis. I hope you'll answer it. Just requires a yes or a no. When you examined the qualifications of the five companies considered, did you really believe that Strategic Telemetrics was unbiased? A yes or a no?
And again, this is the time for public comment, and so the commissioner's role at this point is
All right.
limited to listening to you.
We'll conclude. I hope you will ask yourself that question.
Thank you. Our next speaker is James Cook, representing Self, subject fairness in redistricting.
James Cook. James, C-O-O-K, Oro Valley. I'm another one of those that have come out of the woodwork. I've never spoken at one of these political meetings before. Always believed that the people on these commissions would do the right thing. It's obvious to me they're not. And I'd like to cite that the lady spoke about the polls, how the polls are shifting to independents. My feeling is there's a lot of Democrats that are absolutely upset with this just as well. There's many honest Democrats just as well. And I think you're an embarrassment to them as well. So I stand by what 99% of the people have spoken here today, and I'll say no more. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mohur Sidwa, representing Self, and the subject is redistricting in favor of competitiveness.
Yes, the name is Mohur Sidwa, M-O-H-U-R-S-I-D-H-W-A. When you look at most state maps, you get a feeling that a fifth grade class using no more than a ruler would probably have come up with more and balanced districts if you look pretty much anywhere in the U.S. I want to talk about competitive districts and redistricting as well as communities of interest. It is true that a reservation like the Pasquayaki should not be divided, but every time the community of interest dominates the consideration, we wind up with highly improbable looking contiguous areas. We also wind up with protection for people who have lost their energy but improved their contacts while in elected office. A lack of functionality in government, including Arizona, tells me that competitiveness of districts is the most important criteria. We need to be able to debate back and forth, but if the election results are foregone conclusions, it leads to voter apathy. And it hurts the very concept of democracy if there isn't enough competitiveness. And that is, after all, what this nation was built on, was democracy and competitiveness. By the time this whole horse and pony show is over and done with, yes, you will be vilified, probably from all sides of the aisle. Keep focusing on your job without allowing yourselves to be bullied. No matter how many people are turfed in here, do what you think is right, and that is basically all of you, because it's a very difficult job. And I thank you all for doing it, but do keep competitiveness in mind, because that is the essence of democracy, not caging. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Onita Davis, representing Tucson Smart Girl Politics, and the subject is RFP selection.
Good morning once again. From the beginning, the RFP process appears to have been stacked against an unbiased and nonpartisan decision. The voting record of our independent commissioner has consistently been along party lines and has compromised the integrity of the independent in the AIRC. Despite the concerns expressed to the commission by the citizens of this community, the voices of the people have once again been silenced by partisan politics. And I appreciate what the lady just said and her point of view. And I'm not asking for consideration as either a Democrat or a Republican, because I'm an independent. And I thought that this is what the commission was supposed to be: independent, nonpartisan. The most politically biased company of the four considered has been selected. Strategic Telemetry has publicly stated a position that is contrary to the Arizona laws and the IRC criteria governing the redistricting process. Yes, communities of like interest is one of the criteria. Yes, competitiveness is one of the criteria. There are 5 important items to be considered in redistricting. Only 2 are really being talked about today. If you did not listen to our concerns during the selection process, how can we trust you to listen to us during the mapping process? It is obvious that we cannot.
Our next speaker is Bill Yarnell, representing himself, and the subject is competitive districts.
Hi, Bill, B-I-L-L, last name Yarnell, Y-A-R-N-E-L-L. I live in Vail, and I'd like to talk today about competitive districts. I came to the previous commission a decade ago to talk to them about competitive districts, and they used commonalities of interest and minority representation and some other excuses for not coming up with competitive districts. Out of the 30 state districts in the legislature, 3 of them were competitive. Now, politicians are most responsive if they're in a competitive district. If they're in a district where they're going to get reelected every time, whether they do anything or not, they're not going to listen to their constituents. So competitive districts end up having the best politicians, the best elected officials. So please don't use any excuses like the last commission did, and make sure all the districts are competitive, or as many as possible, because that's for a healthy democracy, a healthy Arizona. Whatever company ends up doing the mapping, don't use that as an excuse. Don't say, oh, well, the mapping company wanted it here or there. It's your decision. The 5 of you make the final decisions. Please make sure Arizona has competitive districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is James Kelly, Chairman, LD 29 Pima GOP, and the subject is mapping vendor.
Thank you very much for letting me address you again. James Kelly, K-E-L-L-E-Y. I'm not going to pretend to belong to a nonpartisan group. I am a partisan individual. I am the chairman of LD 29 for the GOP. But I also live in Rancho Valencia. My community has absolutely nothing in common with most of 29 in terms of how it's presently set up. We have a very downtown-centric leadership. We have one member of our delegation that doesn't even live in the district, and yet he's calling for competitive districts, and he runs unopposed. So go figure. Strategic Telemetry was a bad decision. I do hope that you all revisit it. It simply was a very, very bad decision. There are 2 Arizona vendors that could do the job just as well. It is not my job to be nonpartisan and independent. It is your job to be nonpartisan and independent. There's been way too much ArizonaRedistricting.com, supported by 8 different organizations that are heavily and whose mission is the election of progressive Democrats. And yet you touted them and said how much we should all go to ArizonaRedistricting.com and use their mapping process that only about half the people could get into. Not once has anybody said, oh, go support Pima Tea Party Patriots, or go support Citizens for Sensible Redistricting. So obviously there's a bias there, and that bias needs to stop. It needs to stop entirely. You need to just stop listening to them. You need to throw them out of your commission and move on with what the people are looking for. If you want competitive districts and you want to look at an example of a very non-competitive district, just look at 29. You know, there's no way that is a competitive district in any way, shape, or form. It is my sincere desire, Mr. Executive Director, that my borders change for LD 29. I need to pick up voters. 28, 30, and 27 need to lose voters. It's just that simple. I would like my borders moved. I want Campbell to be my western border, Houghton to be my eastern border, Broadway to be my northern border, and Pima Mine Road to be my southern border. That's the way. We have much more in common with each other. We have homeowners associations. We don't have a highly transient population like we do west of Campbell. So east of Campbell, west of Houghton, south of Broadway, north of Pima Mine Road. That's what I want, and any company that will give me that, great. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Steve Doizen, and you can correct me if I'm mispronouncing that. Representing himself, the subject is mapping.
Sorry for my poor handwriting. It's Stephen Dotson, S-T-E-P-H-E-N D-O-T-S-O-N. A little better? All right, I want to talk to you about the mapping. The consideration of companies not from Arizona but from Washington, D.C. only sends money and jobs to national political interests and disregards the local communities that they affect. Do not let our tax dollars be spent to take jobs away from Arizonans. Dissolving communities of like interest to change the balance of power in the state legislature is both unethical, it is biased, it is irresponsible. This panel must listen to the constituency, and I use that term because you are appointed here to represent all Arizonans, not just Democrats. If failure to do this will completely unveil a bias on this panel and result in more of our precious Arizona tax dollars and time spent on litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jerry Ottoboni, representing PTOT. The subject is mapping. And if you could again remind us what PTOT stands for.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, it's Network of Tucson. My name is Jerry Ottoboni, and that's O-T-T-O-B-O-N-I. It means nine good in Italian. After I spoke at your meeting in Phoenix yesterday, I get the impression that you're not interested in citizen input, as your website and you all have stated. You have chosen a company from Washington, D.C., not Arizona. I'm shocked. Arizona needs money. Arizona needs jobs. An Arizona company knows more about Arizona. You have chosen an obviously Democrat company, one whose president, Ron Strassma, was the national director of Obama's 2008 national targeting. Excuse me, how nonpartisan is that? The most Democrat companies of all of the companies interviewed, why take financial advantage out of Arizona and give it to Washington, D.C.? This smacks of bias. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shirley Cooney, representing Self, and the subject is fairness in redistricting.
I'm Shirley Cooney. That's S-H-I-R-L-E-Y. C-O-O-N-E-Y, and I'm from Pima County. And I just wish to say, as I'm holding here a paper from the Proposition 106, which has given all of you a very serious charge. And this is what the voters voted for when this came up in that election. And it relates to the ending of the practice of gerrymandering and improving voter and candidate participation in elections by creating an independent commission of balanced appointments to oversee the mapping of fair and competitive congressional and legislative districts. And I must say, I was quite appalled when I heard yesterday that there had been a mapping company chosen that was so highly partisan as the one which we are facing now. And if the voters who voted for this initiative, when they find out who this mapping company is, I think there are going to be repercussions. We as voters of Arizona should expect, we should demand that we have fair and balanced districting so we can have fair elections. May the best candidate win, but only if we have fair districting. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Donald Spann, representing Jennifer Rawson, and the subject is redistricting.
I am Don Spann, S-P-A-N-N, and this is a letter from Jennifer Rawson, R-A-W-S-O-N. Jennifer is a city candidate for city council. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Rawson. I am the new residence greeter in the Harrison Hills Homeowners Association. We are on the northeast side of Tucson. We have an area of interest with the total east side of Tucson from Bear Canyon to Rita Ranch. We are presently in one congressional district. It would be unfair and unfortunate if this commission would lump us in with the south side of Tucson. We live close to open lands and have great views of the mountains. Our social and political structure is mirrored with a district that runs north to south as opposed to east and west. I know you will do what is beneficial to your party. When you make that choice, you reduce the representation that is available to the people. Each election should be an honest contest of ideas. Power should be in the hands of the people. I respectfully request that you do not gerrymander for the benefit of a party, but honestly redistrict for fair representation of all the citizens. Jennifer would say thank you. I say thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Held. Again, you can correct me. He's representing LD 26 GOP.
That's close enough, Madam Chairman,
Thanks.
as long as you call me for dinner. It's H-E-A-L-D, Jack. In regard to the independence of the commission, I have two questions for you. Why was Chris Gleason not considered eligible to serve? Was it because he was a Christian? The second question is, considering Representative Grijalva and President Obama's calls for an Arizona boycott, why would this company come, and better, why would we send money out of state? As the Mexican lady on the TV ad said to Raul, shame on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Merritt McLaughlin, representing Sun City Vistoso, and the subject is redistricting.
That is Merritt, M-E-R-R-I-T-T-M-C, G-L-O-T-H-L-I-N. I'm not going to be redundant, and it would be an understatement to say that redistricting is not a hot topic or hot button item. But judging from the comments that I have heard here today, our little experiment here in Arizona, as being, I think, one of two states in the country to allow redistricting to be done by an independent, I put in quotations, independent panel, is a tough process. I don't know, as I don't know any of you, I can't look into your heart and know why you took on this job. And I don't know if any of you have ulterior motives or not, but I can say this, that it is a tough process, and it should be an open process, and I hope that you have sat here and listened to this crowd and do not casually and arrogantly dismiss this group as a bunch of disgruntled Republicans. They are Americans, they are Arizonans, and all they want is a proper, independent redistricting of the state and congressional districts without bias, and it certainly should be done, I would think, by Arizonans. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Bugart, representing SELF, and the subject is Choice of Firms Committee Makeup.
I'm Joe Bogart, that's B-O-O-G-A-A-R-T, and I'm a resident of Marana, and I haven't participated, I haven't come to any of the others, but somebody notified me and said, yeah, you might be interested if you came down here. All I can say is, wow. I went to the University of Arizona. I moved away. I went to Florida for about 28 years. My wife said, I'm going back to Arizona. You coming? And so here I am. But in Florida, we had something called the Sunshine Law. And there were no closed meetings. And I think that's what we're failing to have here. There's a lot of closed-door meetings on this, and I think if it was more open, that more correct solutions would be made, and a lot more knowledge would be had by the public. And maybe eliminate a lot of the antagonism that we have here. But I've been listening to the people here, and I was going to reiterate what they all said, but they said it pretty darn good. It appears to me that there's a majority of the people here that have great concerns about this, and I think it's your responsibility as a commission to listen to it. That's that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda White, representing Precinct 326, and the subject is Mapping Company Designee.
That's LINDAWHITE. I just want to add my voice to the majority of people here who are very outraged at the selection of the mapping company. At the Oro Valley meeting, the chairwoman recognized my question from the audience when I asked how many of those mapping firms were from Arizona. Although after she answered and told me two, she was told the information was confidential. I was somewhat pleased that perhaps a mapping company would be from Arizona. It's an outrage that the business would go outside of this state. It's an outrage and an absolute red flag that a company that is about to have a recall in the state of Wisconsin did not make you sit up and realize that perhaps this was not the company to choose. So on behalf of everyone sitting here, I too am outraged at the selection of this company.
Our next speaker is Chris Bubaney, representing SELF, and the subject is Mapping the Districts.
That's Chris with a CH, last name Bubany, B-U-B-A-N-Y. I'm a small business owner and wanted to come to some of these redistricting meetings, but I couldn't because they were held during the day most of the time or up in Phoenix. It's only because I'm on a staycation this week that I'm able to be here. So my original intent was to come and talk about redistricting, keeping in mind communities of interest. I live in the Tanque Verde Valley. I do a lot of my business. I go to church, all kinds of things in that valley. And so I was going to implore this committee to keep that in mind, communities of interest, not competitive districts, because communities of interest need to be represented by the people they elect who are going to respond to those interests. But then when I found out that this out-of-town company had been chosen for the mapping, I thought, what good will it do me to come and make a case for redistricting with communities of interest? And not only was it an out-of-town company chosen, it was one that is highly favorable to the Obama administration. Arizona is a majority Republican. Next, we're independent. Third, we're Democrat. Now, is this another fundamental transformation of America, where we're going to have a company, not even of Arizonans, to redistrict our state for us? I think that's not right. And it is a company that expressly says that they are progressive Democrats. Now, we know progressive is a nice word for socialist. And we also know that the Democratic Party is being hijacked by the socialist movement, which maybe is only 20% of the party. Is this okay with the majority of Democrats, that we are leaning to become a more socialist country? That is not what we are about. And it's very disappointing now to see how that company, who is progressive Democrats, highly favoring the Obama administration, is now going to have influence in this state. That is not right.
Our next speaker is Diana Lebrecht, representing SELF, and the subject is redistricting mapping.
My name is Diana Lebrecht, D-I-A-N-N-A. Thank you. Last name Lebrecht, L-E-B-R-E-C-H-T. I'm a native of Tucson. My parents moved here in '45. They love this town, and I love this town. I love this whole valley, and I love our state. I wish to remain here. I sell real estate, and I have since 1971. But I can tell you that I'm getting more and more comments that we don't want to stay in Arizona. We sure don't want to stay in Tucson or Pima County. It's getting corrupt. Nobody is listening to the people. Now, you know what? I've been looking in your eyes since I've been here. And I know you have good hearts. I know each and every one of you have good hearts. And I know that you can listen to your highest sense of what's right to do. We always have to listen to the people, because that is what brought us to America. We listened to the people. We didn't want a select few in England to tell us what was best for us and regulate and dictate to us so that a few would govern the rest. Now, you guys are good people. Listen to what's being said. You can change your mind. It's okay. You don't have to laugh at the man that said he'd be happy to write that resignation letter. It's okay. It needs to be done. You guys made a mistake. You're good people. And I'm trusting in your highest sense of what's right. Lebrecht means live right. Come on, let's do it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barney Brenner, and you'll have to tell us who you're representing. The subject is clear conflict of interest.
Hi, I'm Barney Brenner, B-R-E-N-N-E-R, and I'm just representing myself. I didn't come here planning to speak, but there have been so many astonishing revelations here today that I just wanted to comment, despite the fact that you think, although Arizona is or has been significantly Republican in recent years, Pima County in southern Arizona and Tucson is largely Democrat majority, and you'd think that the actions of this board, which seems to me highly partisan and biased, would be championed by people in this community. Yet here you have a room full of people who showed up in this, in what's somewhat a partisan community here, yet they want to see fairness. They don't want to see bias. They don't want to see a conflict of interest, which was the subject line that I put down. Now, I could be wrong, but Madam Chairman, if you're married to a man who was the treasurer on a campaign for a Democrat that came in, that got the third largest amount of votes for 2 seats under the existing district lines, you'd think that that would represent a clear conflict of interest in being on a committee that wants to redraw those lines. Now, I do want to ask one thing that's been kind of tiptoed around, but it's a one-word answer. I haven't gotten a clear answer. On the contract that was given to this so-called mapping firm, has that been signed in ink? Is it a done deal? Okay, can't answer. Then let me just say, if it has, there's usually clauses in these contracts that manage to cover a company's expenses up to a particular point if they've done any work. If they haven't done work, sometimes there's still clauses in there that they get paid. Just so you don't use it as an excuse that we don't want to cost the taxpayers money, I'm sure you could get lots and lots of private citizens who would love to offset the costs so we can have an unbiased firm doing this process. And but I mostly wanted to talk to say that I wanted to get the words conflict of interest on the record clearly, because it does seem to me that that's the case, and the fact that if someone lost under the existing lines and the chairman's husband worked for that person, it seems clear to me the right thing to do when you have a conflict of interest. I hear there's a process for removing members of the commission. I hope that's not necessary. It seems to me whenever you have a conflict of interest, the right thing to do is to step down and say, I can't be impartial. So one way or another, I hope that's done, and I hope we can get an unbiased committee here and an unbiased result. Thank you.
Mr. Brunner, could you just state where you live?
I live, I'm in the county. I'm just outside the city limits.
Of Tucson.
Of Tucson, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Curtis Dutiel, representing SELF, and the subject is mapping company.
My name is Curtis Dutiel, C-U-R-T-I-S-D-U-T-I-E-L. I'm a resident of Tucson. I'm a second-generation native of Tucson and third-generation Arizonan, if that really matters. With some people it seems to. I'm here to speak about the selection of a mapping company. It seems a lot of people are upset that this particular company has ties or has done work for other companies. The maps that are drawn that are going to be created, it doesn't matter who creates them, the commission has the final say. And I think that seems to be lost. Another thing that seems to be lost is that while this company is from Washington, D.C., the other company that got votes was from California. So it seems to me that at some point in time, the companies that were in the running for this that were from Arizona were dropped by the wayside for one reason or another. This commission was created to be independent. The process was clear, drawn out, had to go through one revisit. And I think we need to let the commission kind of do their work. And I'm hoping the commissioners will realize that though you have people up here that are yelling and screaming, don't just listen to people because they are the most that can make a meeting in the middle of the day when many people are working, that they look at what they've done and they've made a choice. Let's move on. Keep revisiting these issues is going to draw this process out longer and actually could result in the feds actually having more of a say in this. Let's let the commission of people from Arizona do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is David Higuera, representing self, and the choice is of out-of-state firm is the subject.
Can I remind the audience not to, when people are making comments, whether you agree with them or not, don't speak under your breath loudly, and let people voice their opinions. So I'd appreciate your respect of every person speaking, whether you agree with them or not.
My name's David Higuera, Higuera. Somebody just mentioned it, but one of the other firms, a couple of the other firms I think that you guys were looking at were also out of state. I think it's really interesting. The firm that was chosen 10 years ago was the same California firm that was in the running this time. They were chosen by the 2000 IRC. They made the maps that was approved by the 2000 IRC. I doubt that a lot of people in this room would be as up in arms if that same California firm had just been chosen yesterday. So I think this whole argument about it's an out-of-state firm and the economy and why aren't we spending our money in Arizona is just a total red herring. On the other hand, I do think there's something important to consider now that you've got your firm. Last time around, 10 years ago, that redistricting commission took the competitiveness criteria and they put it way at the bottom. They thought they had to answer all the other ones first, and then if they can get some competitive in there, they tried. We ended up with, I think, 4 or 5 truly competitive districts in Arizona out of 30. We ended up with about 16 or 17 quote-unquote safe Republican districts and 6 or 7 or 8 quote-unquote safe Democratic districts. A situation like that just means you're always going to have one party in power. And I'm an American. I believe that 2 parties in power is the way our system was meant to be. And so I hope at the end of the day, regardless of all the rhetoric you hear, that you guys just focus on the most competitive maps at the congressional level and legislative level that you can possibly come up with, because ultimately when candidates have to run for the middle and run for the moderate votes, that's when we end up with better government. And I think we can all agree in this room that the government we've seen here in Arizona for the last few years has been lacking. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maria Apodaca, representing self, and the subject is choice.
Good afternoon. I wasn't planning on speaking. Okay, thanks. I just felt really compelled in my heart to get up here and Maria, M-A-R-I-A, Apodaca, A-P-O-D-A-C-A.
And sorry, if you could just state where you live, county or city.
Tucson County. And just because some people have said, my family has been here for years, even when this was still Mexico. So I have deep roots in this area. I don't know if that really matters, but what I wanted to say was this. This is America, and we are a republic. You are to represent the people and the people's voice and hear what the people have said. And what I find disheartening is when people go and take time, because we're all busy people. I work, I have children, one of my children is disabled. It's hard for me to get out and do things like this in the middle of the day, well, at any time really. But when I do, and then I just feel like it's a real big slap in the face when things go the other way, because the people's position has not been taken to heart. And I really want to put I really am asking you, I want to put my faith back into the system, because right now it's not there. I feel like I've been, my voice has not been representative in what I have to say. Now, I understand there was Proposition 106. If you look at the details that are on there, what you're to do, the criteria, I think that's what you should follow. That should be your guidelines. I don't know if you take an oath for this position. I don't know, but you do? You do all take an oath for this position? I ask you please to honor the oath you take. This has been one of my pet peeves for the longest time is, you know, Congress and everybody takes an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, but yet we've gone so far away from it. And it really is a pet peeve of mine, okay? If you're going to be in a position, any position, whether it's federal, state, or local level, honor the oath you take, okay? Honor it. go back and look at Proposition 106 and read what is there. Now, for this law firm company, or not the law firm, but the mapping company that you have got, from what I'm hearing from everybody today, and I just found out yesterday myself, it's a progressive Democrat mapping company. I don't know how you can get fair redistricting from that. So, again, help me put my faith back into the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brandon Patrick, representing Self. Subject is Redistricting General.
Good afternoon. It's Brandon, Patrick is the spelling on the last name. I'm a Tucson resident. Thank you. I'm here for two things. First off, to thank the Commission for the work that they do. I know that it is a thankless job. It can be a thankless job, and there are people that appreciate the work that you guys are doing. The other thing that I wanted to say was that, to me, this issue boils down to the intelligent expenditure of taxpayer money. As I understand it, we had two people in the running, or two firms, Arizona firms in the running for this contract. One of them was ruled out of hand by Republicans. It was accused of being a Democrat firm, and the other firm that I believe the Republicans were in favor of had absolutely no experience whatsoever with redistricting. So those two were ruled out, leaving us with the California firm, and the one that ended up being chosen. As has already been said, the California firm did their work last time and didn't do it extraordinarily well with concern to making, creating competitive districts. So as a taxpayer, my concern, honestly, and as a voter, is that we have districts that are competitive and a contract or a contractor that's able to fulfill the requirements of the contract. That requires experience. I think what the Commission has done, although no solution is absolutely perfect, I think that the Commission has chosen the contractor with the most experience and which is most able to complete this contract successfully. And I think that they're on the right track with that decision, and I think we should press forward with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cruz Moran. Again, you can correct me. The subject is review, and you'll have to tell us who you're representing. Thanks.
Hello, how's it going? My name is Cruz Moran. I'm a civilian, as anybody in this room.
Can you state where you reside?
What's that?
Can you say where you reside, either town or
East Side, past
East Side,
Seco
Tucson.
and Speedway. Yeah, definitely. I don't know who has the authority or to make decisions in this course and time, but most importantly, what citizens want to know more about is check your history. How renovations and innovations accumulated over time. Do some research. I'm not going to tell you guys what to do or how to do it. Just brief input on what you guys are doing and paying attention on how well you do it. Communicate within each other, because most people, get tired and, they really don't want to speak how they feel. Like Obama, this guy, he's shaking everybody's hand, he's trying to meet everybody and trying to get a feel for who they are really. As your citizens here in Arizona, they all feel the same way in the concerns. Progress is not going to happen overnight. We all know that. It takes time, bring in education. I watch the news constantly, things like fires burning out there, wasting millions of dollars trying to cool these fires out. I mean, pick up some dirt, throw some dirt on it, and stop wasting so much of your resources. Another way that we could impact and subside the global warming and all these conditions that are occurring in environmental patterns as well, is that to create more jobs and stabilize more jobs, we would have to Like the CFW, like back in the day where they created or accumulated a bunch of people to work out and plant trees somewhere, you know, whoever they may be, but they grew fonder, they grew as a society, you know, they united more. These people, you know, reconstructed and national forests, Saguaro National Forest, Grand Canyon. They designed the whole thing. I mean, I'm not pointing out and saying specific things here, but this is just a matter of who you are and where you are at and what you're doing with your productivity. You know, race doesn't really matter to me. I'm Hispanic, but I've been involved. I've traveled from West Coast to East Coast. I've traveled, there's probably like 4 states that I haven't been to. And Arizona is probably the only state that involves a lot of adversity within borderlines. Other states are isolated. They're conservative in some degree. They deal with their own statual concerns, you know, whether the community gets involved, it doesn't get involved. You know, I'm saying I'm trying to expand your guys' horizons to communicate with other individuals instead of just, you know, narrowing it down. You know, most people are concerned about their health issues, how healthcare is, how healthcare is costs. You know, a visit to the ER is probably, you know, thousands of dollars. You know, just to go to a visit. I mean, there's a lot of things that play a part. You know, I'm from a young generation. I'm 23 years old. I can sit here and talk about and give you guys information that's valid because, you know, it's true and it's happening. It's reoccurring. It's progressive. It's going forward, not backwards. You know, most individuals are could be Republican or Democratic. You know, right now we got Democratic campaigns out there.
Mr. Moran, I apologize, but we asked all the public to limit their comments to 3 minutes. So
3 minutes.
We've gone over that. So
all right.
If you could wrap up, that'd be great.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You guys know what you guys are doing, and you know, just figure it out.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lee Corneliuson. I'm sorry, Cornelison. Really bad. Representing self, and the subject is representing democracy. Thanks.
My name is Lee Cornelison. It's Cornelison. I live in Green Valley. And I'll tell you, about a year ago, my wife and I retired and decided to come home to Arizona. One of the reasons we wanted to come home to Arizona, one of the many reasons, was we felt like this state had a good government, constitutional democracy that protected and defended representative democracy. This commission has a responsibility to protect that thing called representative democracy that I spent 30 years in an Army uniform defending and protecting. That's a huge responsibility. And as a veteran, I charge each one of you to be unbiased, to forget your political alignments before you came here. You need to protect the very principles that this country survives on and thrives on. As I said, I've only been here a year, but what I'm reading in the papers makes me question how unbiased this commission is. The selection of a mapping firm, I have to ask the question, That is so biased and so far over to the left, I have to ask, did you do that as a red herring? Because you knew there would be a public outcry. Was that simply an act to try to have the opportunity to select the firm you really wanted? I can't believe 5 intelligent people could make that decision. And finally, I'll end with this. Ms. Mathis, if you're an independent, I'm a French fry.
Our next speaker is Frank Rice, representing SELF, and the subject is mapping the districts.
My name is Frank Rice, R-I-C-E. I'm a Tucson resident, lived here since 1986. I'm from Atlanta. I'll try to be coherent. I am heartsick, and I'd like to point out to the commission that that's what you're hearing. You're hearing from people that are heartsick, because we know, I'm 65 years old, we know that without the strong fundamental principles of our founding documents, that we're never going to survive the progressive element in this country. And the war, the political war between the progressives and the conservatives in this country has been going on for 100 years. I'm not sure if you all know that. Now listen, just as an aside, I spent 10 of those 65 years living in and around Washington, D.C., and I can guarantee you there is no more corrupt city in this nation than Washington, D.C. If you have lived there, then you know that to be true. But I think I've probably spent more time there than you have. If you go and, there's nothing wrong with evolution, progress, that kind of thing. But without a firm founding in a basic principle, a basic virtue, a basic honesty, and a basic liberty, you have nothing but corruption, which is why we're all heartsick about this, because we know we got an uphill battle. What you're about to do is give the advantage to the people we consider to be political enemies. That is a progressive socialist agenda, is my political enemy, because that party ignores my liberty, my right to be an individual that's free to pursue my own God-given abilities and talent and to travel from one state to another, which Canadians could not do until 1987. I'm not sure if you knew that. If you look at this founding document of ours, the preamble, it says, "We the people." What that actually means is that the people of the United States are self-governing, and you have been chosen as a representative of the people of the state of Arizona. And our input is to be represented by you, not given away to a company that lives in the most corrupt city in the nation. I just need to let you know, if you do not listen to the people, then our ability to self-govern has been cut off at the knees. That's why everybody in this room is heartsick, with the exception of a couple of people. And I would just like for you to consider that without Without that ability to self-govern and the freedom that has given us all over these last 200 some years, you would not even be sitting here in this position of responsibility. It's not a position of authority, it's a position of responsibility to us, we the people. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shelby Hawkins, representing SELF, and the subject is mapping.
Hi, my name is Shelby Hawkins. I've lived in this community since August 1st, 1978. I came to Tucson because my husband's parents were here and started a business. I'm a small business owner. I'm in my 31st year. As raising a family by myself, because I was divorced early on, I really didn't have a lot of time to get into politics. Raising 3 little babies by myself was kind of tough. But as the business was growing, I kept hearing this one name, and the name was Grijalva. And again, I didn't pay attention to any political activities, but because I was just too busy building my business. I can tell you in the last 10 years here in Tucson in southern Arizona, it has gotten harder and harder and harder to run a business. It's gotten beyond competitive. It's gotten progressively worse. And the one man that called for a boycott in our state is a progressive Democrat. Now, I hear a lot of people talking to you folks, and I hear them saying, please listen to me, and please understand where we're coming from. From me, I see that you are hearing, but you're not listening. And as far as I'm concerned, I really don't have a whole lot of faith in what you're going to do. So just keep that in mind for businesses, because you're driving more and more out of this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Randy Graff, representing SELF, and the subject is mapping and Prop 106.
Madam Chairman and Commission, thank you for being here today. My name is Randy Graff. I live in Green Valley, which is in the county. 10 years ago, I had the privilege of serving in the legislature when the first Redistricting Commission was put together and did their business. Proposition 106, when it was passed, basically, and what I told that commission then was it gave them a virtually impossible task. You're being asked to create districts that are competitive, that represent communities of interest, that are contiguous. There's about a half a dozen different criteria. You may be able to get a district that is competitive. You may be able to get a district that is contiguous. You may be able to get a district that, out of 30, you may get one district that will combine 3 or 4 of the criteria you're supposed to try to meet. So you've been given an impossible task. I think the last commission did the best they could under the circumstances. Brand new, they had to come up with 30 new districts and 8 congressional districts. But I'm challenging right now the schedule and the pace that you're on. Are you planning on tweaking the current districts, or are you going to start from scratch and create 30 brand new legislative districts and 9 new congressional districts? You've got elected officials that want to know whether or not they're going to be in the district they ran in last time or something that is closely representing it, or are they starting over? You got voters want to know. You got possible candidates that need to know. At this point in time, I'm concerned about the schedule on the pace and when these districts are going to be put out to the public. But with the selection and what I've heard here today, and I went to the meeting you had in Oro Valley a few weeks ago, and with the selection of this particular firm and the outrage that has been presented here by the public today, I've got some concerns that A, the proposition the way it was passed was flawed, that it is impossible to implement, and that maybe, just maybe, it is time for Prop 106 to be repealed. Thank you.
Thank you. This is my last request to speak form. If anyone else would like to address us, feel free to fill one out and give that to our Executive Director, Ray Bladine. Our next speaker is Matt Kopek, and he's representing SELF, and the subject is mapping and fairness.
Thank you. My name's Matt Kopek, K-O-P-E-C. I live in Tucson, Arizona. I just want to begin with, I'm a voter and a taxpayer. I'm a voter and a taxpayer, and I believe that the choice of going with a firm that has the experience and expertise was the right decision. I know that was a sentiment shared by all commission members. All commission members felt that it was best to go out of state for a firm to do that. Then on the other point I wanted to make is I believe that it's paramount that the commission prioritize competitiveness. I believe that people have the right to change government if they don't like the direction it's going, and I believe the last commission didn't give us that opportunity. So these are some tough decisions. I believe you are on the right track. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Is there another one? Oh, we ran out of forms, so this. Thank you. Our next speaker is Barry Kirchner. The subject is competitiveness. He's representing SELF. And if you wouldn't mind spelling your name for the record. And
I live in Tucson. My name is Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, Kirchner, K-I-R-S-C-H-N-E-R. The two states with which I'm most familiar regarding its political functions are Arizona and California. Both states are in the throes of deadlock where the sides don't talk to each other. There's virtually no change in both congressional districts and legislative districts in the state of California, and on the state level, it's virtually the same in Arizona. We have a system where partisans are elected in a primary, and those who vote in the primary tend to be the most extreme. And what's happening in states, not only California and Arizona, is that the quality of government and how it performs for the people deteriorates. There are many criteria that you're supposed to be looking at. The competitiveness is the central criteria, in my opinion, on what might make the government function in an improved manner in the future. The second thing I mentioned on the form, wasn't really a form, it was just a blank piece of paper that I filled out, was evidence. It's quite possible that the chairwoman couldn't read my writing because it would put you in a large group of people who've tried. The charge that you have is to do the best that you have, the best that you can. And the way that reasonable, responsible people do the best that they can is not by functioning in an evidence-free zone, not by cutting off people or data, but by analyzing data, looking particularly for the logic in the data, and acting in accordance with your mission and the logic that you find. When you go ahead and you weigh several different competing entities, the investment of time that you put in that is far greater than the investment of time that someone may read in the email which calls for action in making a complaint about it. The nature of your work is complex. Former Representative Graff was absolutely right in saying that your mission is very difficult and it will be impossible to satisfy everybody. But as far as our collective goal is an improvement of government and better government, relying on the evidence and the logic to help you perform your charge and to create the most competitive districts possible, I believe will improve our situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No more requests to speak forms? Okay. And Mary, is it okay if I can address just some of the criticism, since that's one of the things?
Yes, as is indicated on the agenda, the commission can't discuss the issues that were raised or take action, but at the close of the public comment, you can do what's indicated on the agenda, and one of which is respond to criticism. You can also refer matters to staff or schedule matters for further consideration at a later date.
First of all, I really appreciate everyone coming out and taking time out of their days to come and address us and give us your feedback. I know that the decision yesterday was not a popular one by the majority of the comments here, and that many of you don't agree with my decision on that. And I can only tell you, I would ask you actually, please, to read my statement from yesterday, which is posted on our website, which details my rationale, however flawed that may be, for choosing that firm. And I would really ask you to just have an open mind as you read it, and you can see my rationale and what was behind that decision. There were so many comments, and I'm just trying to think of which ones to address. I did appreciate that the location of the firm was outside, and I wanted to let everyone outside of the state. I wanted to let everyone know how we did this process. We followed state procurement procedure and created a request for proposal that was extremely detailed. All the commissioners had a say in drafting that. And you can view that on the internet, actually, at Procure.az, and maybe we can even put that on our website too, Ray. There are numerous criteria, and it was quite a job to ask of any firm, frankly. Most of these firms put together teams. They put together subcontractors, and they acted as the prime, and then had a numerous group of people around them to respond, because it was such a huge request to ask of any one firm. 7 firms responded to that request for proposal. We had no idea who would be responding. State procurement contacts us one day once the bid had closed and said, these are the 7 firms that responded. We all looked at those firms very carefully and evaluated them on specific criteria that was outlined at the very beginning. Their methodology, their capacity. 2 other were price and conformance. And price and conformance actually were not judged by the commissioners. We didn't get to look at those. That's what state procurement dealt with. So we were really just looking at, could they fulfill what we had written in our scope of work? Could they actually accomplish the mission? Of those 7, we felt there were 4 that could, and we wanted to talk to them further. So we had an interview, which was in public session, which you can view online. If you look at our website and download the June 24th meeting, you can see it all for yourselves and watch the questions we asked and how the firms responded. What you haven't seen yet is the actual the written responses that they submitted to state procurement. And that's something that I'm hoping that Mary and Ray can help us coordinate to get so that it's easily accessible and everyone can see those. Up until yesterday, those were considered confidential documents, and so nobody could see them except us. And that's why also we were always having executive sessions, because it was a requirement of state procurement that we not divulge the contents of those responses. So, and I mentioned this yesterday for anybody who might have been at our meeting. I know it's very frustrating for the public. This is supposed to be as transparent a process as possible. You should have access to everything we're seeing, and all of the commissioners feel that way. Sometimes, we decided to follow that process for state procurement and follow the rules, so we did have to go into executive session on those whenever we discuss those documents. Those now that we've made a selection, those are all available for all of you to read too, and I would ask that you look at those, because I think it's important in terms of like understanding how we came to the decision that we came to. I wanted to see what else. I'd like to also say that all 5 of us, each and every one of us, represents 6.4 million Arizonans. Even though 2 were appointed by Democratic leadership and 2 were appointed by Republican leadership, we all represent everyone, and there is no partisanship that's to be had on the commission. The goal of all of this is to be an independent redistricting commission. That is what Prop 106 called for. We understand that role, and we also all took an oath. That is something that came up, and yes, we did take an oath, and we all take it extremely seriously. I think it's also important to note that this firm, whatever firm we had selected, they act at our direction, period. They are not to define communities of interest. They don't define competitiveness. They don't even define compactness. If you listen to the interviews, Mr. Sturts had asked a question of all of them about a specific test that can be used to measure compactness, because that's one of the 6 criteria that we have to abide by under the Arizona Constitution. These firms, they are technical consultants. That is their role in this. We direct them. We get public input from all of you, and we haven't even started yet that mapping process. You've heard some of the people come and talk about specific boundaries, and that's great. We need to hear from everybody who has an opinion on that matter. But these firms, they do not act on their own volition, ever. They don't do public policy. They strictly are there to draw lines. And we are to tell them how to draw those lines. So it's really up to these 5 commissioners how those lines get drawn. And how we decide is based on your input. And all I can tell you and assure you is we are all listening very carefully to what everyone has to say. There has been a great deal of talk today about partisanship of the firms. There is no question all 4 of them, of the 4 we interviewed, had partisan ties. And it's kind of in the nature of this business that they would, because the people who hire them are typically political candidates. So all of the firms, that was part of our criteria in our RFP, to provide all information on political contributions, on their client list, and their affiliations. If there was anything they thought would impair their decision to be objective and fair in their work, and you'll see this in the request for proposal. It's all outlined in numerous questions. And all the firms were to respond to that, and they all did. They were very forthcoming in their responses. And of those 4, there were 3 that had Democratic leanings and 1 that had Republican leanings. And as I said in my statement yesterday, I would have preferred to have 2 Republican-leaning firms and 2 Democratic-leaning firms for balance, so that we could have made a decision based on those 4. that wasn't the hand we were dealt. So we looked at those 4 and compared their responses and what they said in their interviews to what we had requested. And that is how we made the decision that we made. 2 of the firms had direct prior in-state Arizona involvement. And 1 firm did not have any, and then 1 firm didn't have the redistricting experience that we needed to move forward. They had redistricting experience in 1 county, but no state-level redistricting experience. So by process of elimination, the 2 in-state, the 2 firms that had in-state prior Arizona involvement had a lot of baggage, frankly. 1 firm had done it previously, and there are people on one side that view what they did last time as not good, and there's the other side that says what they did do is good. And there are very passionate expressions on both sides regarding that work. I would like to say that previous commission, the first commission, my hat is off to them. They did the best they could with the information they had. They didn't have a Supreme Court decision that had decided how to deal with those 6 criteria that the Arizona Constitution has outlined. Someone had mentioned earlier that it is a very difficult process, and it is, and they performed their task very admirably, did the best they could with the information they had, and made the best decisions they could, and that's all we can ask of anyone. Mary, I'm curious, can the other commissioners at all address the criticism too, or is it only the chair?
Other commissioners can as well. What the law says is at the conclusion of an open call to the public, individual members of the public body may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the public body, and then some other things they can do as well. But it's individual members. But there's no discussion among the members. You just make your individual comments.
Okay. I asked that because I would ask my fellow commissioners to also speak, and I'm sorry for taking this much time, but I just think it's really important, given the amount of comments we heard here today, and to show that we are all listening, and to see what others have to say. So I would ask the other commissioners if they have anything. I'd welcome their thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this working? I would only add that for me, the skill that this company brings to bear that really stood out for me is the expertise they have in documenting every single change that's made to a map and evaluating all the public input that we receive, helping us to integrate that into the maps, deciding, for example, whether the public input is directed toward a particular district. They can tell us whether a particular change that has been proposed in a map, how that affects the criteria in the Constitution that we have to comply with. If we move a line based on another comment, they will be able to tell us how it either improves a set of criteria or makes the situation worse. And they have some very sophisticated abilities to document all of the changes that are made so that the public and the Department of Justice, when we have to go to them, can, there will be a complete record.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McNulty.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Sturts.
Madam Chair. I want to talk first about passion. It was very clear to me that the people that came to this meeting today, and I want to thank each and every one of you for bringing your heartfelt passion to this room. You've got a passion for your beliefs, you've got a passion for your community, you've got a passion for your city, you've got a passion for this state. I believe more and above that, you've got a passion for the truth. And so what I want to clear up is a couple things regarding passion. When anyone does whatever job that they do, it's the goal of someone's life. There's an old adage that says if you're doing a job that you love, you never have to work a day in your life. That's because you have passion for that job. The company that we hired has passion. And you can see by their own resume the passion, what they have the passion for. They have a passion for hard, Democrat, partisan processes. They have a passion for causes that are hard, partisan line. You couldn't go through their script and find there was any level of balance at all. They have a passion for it. So when someone has a passion that is that dynamic, it is clear to me that whatever their words are, whatever their rhetoric says, is going to be clear to me that their passion is going to carry through. And whatever we are charged with in our independence about doing the best we can, we are still going to be reviewing documents based on our suggestions and their return of information to us. We will do the best we can with the hand that we've now been dealt. We've been dealt a hand from a group with a company that is extremely passionate about a specific cause. I also want to share something that the choice that was made yesterday was not a choice that was made by two of the Republicans here. The two Republicans voted no against this firm. We voted no, and we had great criteria of why we voted no, and I'm not going to hash over those reasons because it's irrelevant at this time. But I will tell you that the choice that we made for this firm in their own submission, has a price that is going to be the most expensive of all of the firms that were submitted. They have a schedule that is going to last the longest. Their delivered product is the latest in delivery. They are, and that concerns me because it puts an onus on us as commissioners to now respond back. It was brought forth by several members of the community that we are under now an unrealistic time frame. And I also want to correct the record that we as an entire commission did not defer our decision-making to the state procurement office. At one of our very first meetings, I put it on the record that I wanted to have our meetings done in public. That we have, by virtue of Proposition 106, we have constitutional authority to hire any firm that we want, and we can create our own decision-making process. It was by the majority of this commission that decided that it was to the best interest to utilize the state procurement office to assist us in that process. The process what happened was that we actually got a little bit hijacked by this process. Again, I go back to this, that at the very beginning, I suggested at a very early on meeting that if we follow the process outlaid by the Arizona Department of Administration and the State Procurement Office, that at best, the best case scenario is that we would not have a mapping consultant on board until mid-June. I was wrong. We will not have a mapping consultant on board until after the 4th of July. The question came up whether or not the contracts have been let or not. The decision that was made in public session yesterday was that by the majority on a 3-2 split vote, that the authority was given to the executive director, Ray Bladine, to enter contract negotiations with Strategic Telemetry. That was the motion that was made in public session yesterday. So I want to go back to the idea of passion. As we continue through this process, I implore you to continue to bring your passion to these meetings. It is imperative that we hear from you, your neighbors, everyone that you were involved with, about what the passions that you have. There's a young man that came forward and said that we are on the right track. We're on a track. We're on a track that we've been dealt right now, and we will do the best that we can as a commission of 5 to work for the state of Arizona. I can tell you that we in the 2 primary selections of our first of our legal counsel, there was a precedent that was set in the previous commission where the 2 Democrats selected their counsel and the chair acquiesced and voted with the 2 Democrats. and the Republicans voted for their two counsel, and the chair acquiesced and voted for their counsel. The choice for the legal counsel at this time, as you're probably aware, was not followed in that same way. So my concern going forward is that we have a mapping consultant that has been given the executive director has been given the authority to enter into negotiations on. My concern is that whether or not we're utilizing the taxpayers' money in its highest and best use. And my concern is whether or not we even have a chance of meeting a schedule based on the deliverables that they had included in their own proposal. Madam Chair, thank you for indulging me, and thank you everybody here for participating in this process.
Other comments from Vice Chair Freeman or Herrera?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman.
I would endorse Commissioner Sturt's statements. I stated the concerns I had yesterday before the vote. I don't want to belabor them. There was a discussion before the vote yesterday, and it was pointed out that all the commissioners made their decisions based upon their own best independent judgment, based upon the record that was before us. And I believe that. I don't question the motives of anyone on this commission. The record that was put before us was pretty specific. There were proposals submitted by the four vendors, and there was a presentation by the four vendors, and then there was the responses by these vendors to questions put to them by the commissioners. One of my prime concerns was the perception, the public perception of potential bias. That's a big issue for me. We're constitutionally required to carry out our duties in a way that will build public confidence in the process and the result. And for me, based on the record that was before me, that is why I could not, one of the reasons why I could not support strategic telemetry as the mapping consultant. Based on the record that was before me, I thought that there was another firm that, yes, they are based in California. They do have some personnel here in Arizona. They are familiar with Arizona. They did the mapping here before. They've done mapping at various localities in Arizona. But I thought based upon their resume and the other work that they had performed in various other jurisdictions across the country, that there was evidence there, and other evidence as well, such as their principal having been called upon as an authority to speak before the National Conference of State Legislatures in a bipartisan session about redistricting issues, not in a partisan setting at that conference. I thought that was some evidence that where if there was an accusation made of some partisan leading, there's a record to point to give some people some assurances there. As a matter of fact, my initial reaction during the initial evaluation of that firm was that the team that they had assembled, and it was a pretty all-star team, actually leaned to the Democrat side. And in fact, during the public interview, that was one of the first questions put to Mr. Johnson. He's the principal of National Demographics Corporation, who was not selected. Basically, the opening salvos to each one of these vendors was a question of potential political bias. He said that he was ready to answer the question of possible Democratic bias. But I thought other factors in the record before me militated against the conclusion that NDC would be perceived as biased either way. I can't say that for strategic telemetry, which is one of the reasons why they didn't get my vote. But yesterday there was a 3-2 vote, and Mr. Bladine was given authorization to enter into a contract with that company. I do not know the status of those negotiations, but I assume that will happen fairly quickly, and I want to move forward with this. I want to move forward with the chair and the other members of this commission and work with strategic telemetry. A mapping consultant, yes, they do follow our direction. That's essentially what they're supposed to do. But understand what also a mapping consultant is asked to do. They are presented with a very complicated problem, a constitution with 6 criteria that all, in some instances, work against each other. It's a complicated problem to solve, and it's important to have trust in that mapping consultant, because when we as a commission, listening to the public, and getting that public input, which is important, because, as an aside, these maps aren't the legislatures. They don't belong to any candidate. They don't even belong to this commission. They belong to the people. The people should get to decide how these maps are drawn, and I think that was one of the intents behind Prop 106, is to let the people have a say in this and involve them in the process. That's a very good thing about having a commission like this. But And by going into that aside, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I think the mapping consultant is going to be asked to make certain decisions, to draw new maps, to say, well, we need to take into consideration this community of interest, or we need to try to make this district more competitive. And they're going to be presenting us with options. And if you can imagine the problem, the complexity of the problem, there are probably a myriad of answers to the problem. And it's important to be able to trust that they're giving us fair and balanced responses, that they're not trying to lead us by the nose to a particular result. And that's a concern I have. I mean, the chair has confidence in this company, so we're going to be entering a contract with them. And I really want, we really need to get going. And I'm looking forward to working with them. And I hope everyone continues to be involved in the process. And I really appreciate hearing from all of you today.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Herrera?
Thank you. I thank you guys also for being here. The two consultants we were at the end that we were considering, the final ones were obviously the one we chose, and also NDC. Now, if we truly cared about public perception, NDC wouldn't have even been considered. NDC did the job last time, and the majority of the people I think that are familiar with what happened last time are pretty unhappy with what they did. I mean, we had Andy Minkoff, who participated in the commission, and she felt she was pretty much ignored throughout the whole process by NDC. NDC's chair is a highly partisan Republican. The Rose Institute, which is affiliated with NDC, basically they're almost a one institution. They just happen to have two names. Their board of directors is highly Republican and highly partisan. So if we truly cared about public perception, they wouldn't have been considered. So let's be honest about that. And the other thing, you guys haven't read the proposal. It is probably the sloppiest proposal I've ever read. Basically what they ended up doing is they got because they applied for the California redistricting. What they ended up doing is basically rewriting this. It's the same, almost the same proposal. All they ended up doing is changing Arizona here and there. Obviously, some other changes, but they forgot in certain cases to change Arizona. They left California. They left some information referring to the California RFP. I mean, just a sloppy proposal. If it was up to me, it wouldn't have been interviewed. Because I guarantee you, if you guys were reading the proposals the way we were doing, they shouldn't have been interviewed at all. They took it for granted that they got the job 10 years ago, and they made $2 million, by the way, around there, roughly $2 million when everything was said and done, not chump change. And I think they came out, they probably lowballed us 10 years ago, but they ended up getting a huge amount of money. So, I mean, let's talk about public perception, what happened 10 years ago. And I don't know how many of you were here 10 years ago. I'm assuming that most of you were in Arizona. Were you protesting NDC? Because NDC was highly partisan. If anybody that thinks that they're not, I don't know what they're smoking. Because they are as partisan as RAS was, which was my first choice, but I acquiesced and said, you know what, I'm going to give them, I'm going to side with the independent and go for the strategic telemetry. So if we're really concerned about those options, about the public perception, then we wouldn't be considering NDC as well. So let's be honest and true to the people that are out here. I care about this state. I'm a social liberal, whatever you want to call me. But I guarantee you that the people out there, we don't have a lot uncommon. We probably have, with Tea Partiers, I probably have a lot more in common than you think. So let's focus on the things that we have in common as Arizonans. Let's move forward because the issue of strategic telemetry isn't going to go away. They will be our mapping consultants. The attorney that we chose, she will be our attorney. So let's stop rehashing what happened in the past. Let's move forward. I think all of you here are smart people. And if you want to rehash the same old things, we're not going to move forward. So, but I do thank you for being here. But remember, we represent 6.5 million people. This is a small sliver of the people that are here. So I guarantee there's people that agree with what we did. Obviously not the majority here, but we're going to disagree and move forward. So I thank you for your comments. I thank you for being respectful. And this is my honest feedback, and hopefully you respect that. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Sturts?
I can't let that go.
No.
We're not arguing with each other. All we can do is respond to the public.
Mr. Herrera said.
You just said we can't let it go.
I can't let this go without making this comment. I'm not making a comment on Mr. Herrera or any other person's comment. It'll be solely on the comments that were made in by reaction to members of the public. All right?
Respond to criticism from the public.
In response to criticism or criticisms of the public. The comments that were coming back were regarding the word trust. I want to focus on the word trust again. It was brought up several times. You don't trust what we're doing.
I do. I do.
Okay.
I'm asking.
Mr. Herrera.
And my comment to that right now is I'm going to go back to a very wise man once said in the middle of one of the toughest times in our generation, and that was the phrase, trust but verify. It is going to be incumbent upon all of us on this commission and all of you in the general public to hear those words that I'm saying, and please help us as we move this along this process. You've just heard the comments that were made, and I'm asking all of you, if you've said that you don't trust this process, that the comment that I want to leave us with right now before we go to the next agenda item is trust but verify. Thank you.
Thank you. The time is 10 minutes to 4, and I am so sorry, Michelle, for not being more, what is the word? Cognizant, thank you, of our time. And we'll go in and take at least a 10-minute break, I think, a recess, so that you can have a break, and sorry that we didn't do that sooner. So the time is 3:50. We'll have a short recess.
Sorry, Mary, didn't we?
From recess, the time is 4:12, and our next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Bladine.
Chairman Mathis and commission members, and you hear me? All right. I believe you have in your packets 3 separate pieces of paper that I thought would be helpful to bring you up to date on our resources for the rest of the year. The first is simply a single sheet, and I believe we had copies in the back, that lists the appropriation for the current year, so that you don't have that copy. Maybe we can, I think I have an extra here. It basically shows we have $3 million for the 2011-12, really the 2012 fiscal year, and $500,000 for this year. That's just the basic information for the budget. Then you have 2 sheets stapled together that are a budget that I threw together quickly as our first draft, and primarily to be able to track our expenditures and to be able to make some changes. The first sheet shows, as of a few days ago, how much money we've spent out of the $500,000 that was appropriated this year, and we are about at having spent $100,000. That number will change when the year end actually closes, but it gives us a carryover balance of approximately $400,000 to be added to the $3 million next year. Then the sheet behind that is a budget projection for the 2012 fiscal year, and basically the estimates I came up with were a total of about $2.5 million at this time. I'm sure one of the big numbers you all would wonder about is the consultant, and without having any idea where we might be, I did plug in a $960,000. I frankly did that by looking at last time in the 2 years they spent about $1.2 million. I figured we probably wouldn't be there, but I don't know. So that number obviously is a pretty wild guess, but I did plug that in at $960. You will also see, and it ties into another part of my report, that under the personal services, actually it's the 6,000 temps plus ERAs, I've plugged in money there to hire temporary staff to go out and do the hearings with us, so that they will help us do the setups, they will help us greet at the satellite locations. I think I budgeted roughly a solid 8 weeks of 5 people at about $22 an hour. Just very kind of the same way for the in-state travel. I looked at what happened last year, did my best, or 10 years ago, and did my best to say, okay, what's a reasonable amount of travel? My thought would be that once we get the expenditures for the end of each month, I would take a look at it, update it, and then give something back to you to see on a monthly basis where are we. So at this point in time, I'm projecting that the rest of this year we would spend $2.5 million. That would leave us an unallocated balance of about $900,000 at this time. That may seem like a lot of money, but I got a funny feeling that as we move along, there will be other costs, and we'll probably end up at least where I would think the commission did last year, or pretty close. But right now our projections are a little less than that. And I'd be happy if there's any questions, and you can send me a note or give me a call, and I'll be glad to respond to them. Or if you want to now, I could do that.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, the issue of staff. When do you expect to have all the staff that you need on board?
I would say within the next 2 weeks. Two things is, one, I need to, and on my report, I will talk about well, I guess I can do it now. It's on my executive director report. We do have the PIO position that needs to be filled. I have received some, I think, very good applications. My suggestion, with your approval, and I guess I can't have you approve it, but my suggestion without someone objecting would be, I'll take those, send them to you with their sheet to ask you to rate them 1 to 10, send the 1 to 10 back to me, and then I can at least take a look at what the top ones are and send them out to you. You might at a future meeting want to create a subcommittee to interview those people. You may want to do it yourself. That's really up to you. But I think if I get you the resumes and I give you a 1 to 10 sheet, just very simply, we can get the numbers down so it'd make it easier for you to deal with it. So that's one position. I probably in this next week will get a temporary manpower or use one of the positions that we'll use for staffing in the office. The phone calls are starting to pick up, and so with that, and then there are 5 positions that in the last week I got authorization through the personnel DOA for 5 temporary positions to do the outreach work, and I'll have the justifications to fill completed, so all the paperwork for us to do that is done, and I would hope to have them towards the end of, if I remember, we're sometime between the end of next week and the start of the following week. We need to have them on board for some training before we start the public hearings. We need to coordinate the public hearings with the mapping consultant, but as a part of my report, I would also tell you that Christina has spent a lot of time in the last few days in particular of trying to locate various facilities throughout the state that we could have hearings, and we will have I think we have sent you a draft schedule, but I think that at this time to really talk about it without the mapping consultant is premature. I did send a copy to the mapping consultant early this morning, and so that he could take a look at what we're talking about, but as a summary, it would involve pretty much solid meetings for about 3 weeks statewide, and we would ask to have one commissioner at each hearing, not the sub-hearings, but that's up to you, and then we would basically have staff. We are going to need to find some facilities that can handle some of the internet functions, because otherwise Buck's family won't see him for 3 weeks, and I don't think that's going to work. But that's kind of where we're headed on that part. The last thing I'd show you is I just gave you the expenditures of the last commission and what they ended up spending during 2001, 2002, and that amount was $3,523,000. They had a $6 million appropriation, but of course that carried over to later years and covered additional legal and mapping expenses. So I guess the simple answer is I think that based upon preliminary analysis, our funding should be adequate, but we'll watch it closely as we go along. Any questions?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, the issue of the PIO and providing the commissioners with the applicants, I would prefer not to be involved. I mean, my personal opinion is that's why we hired you, and I'm not saying this in all due, it's as respectful as I can. I don't want to be involved in the process. I mean, that's why we hired you, and I don't need to be involved. So, but that's just my opinion. This is for me.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Bladine on the budget? Thank you for all this work, by the way, for assembling it all and preparing it for us today.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I, for one, would love to take a look at the 10 applicants, so don't discount me from that outreach. Yeah, am I correct by your recommendation that items 4, 5, and 6 are items that will not be under discussion at this time, pending review of the schedule that you sent to the mapping consultant?
I believe that that is my recommendation. It's up to you and the chair, but I think that it makes some sense. As much as we're anxious to get you to approve a schedule, we really need to coordinate it with the mapping people. You have the data, so you have some idea of what we're talking about, but I don't think, I think it'd be premature to talk about it.
Madam Chair, our next meeting is scheduled for July 7th.
Yes.
I
don't know if we have a venue yet, or...
We do not.
Okay.
When do we know when the venue is going to be selected?
Hopefully soon.
Will it be Tucson or Phoenix?
I don't know the answer to that either.
Okay. And we've got a subsequent meeting scheduled for
the 8th.
The 8th, the following day.
Right.
And again, we don't have a venue or a city for that as well, correct?
No, but I'd make a recommendation to you that we do the 2 meetings in the same location, just because of the setup time and the making sure we have it set up once right.
Yeah.
It is a considerable, it's nice to be out in the community. We will be out in the community somewhere, but it takes a lot of staff time to set up and tear down for each meeting like this where it is not a hearing.
And then, Madam Chair, regarding item number 7, agenda items and dates of future meetings, I think we're going to need a motion to move items number 4, 5, and 6 to the subsequent meeting.
Yep, I think so. I think we're going. Are you done with your executive director report, right, Mr. Bladine?
I would just make 2 other comments.
Go ahead.
That over the last several weeks we have been meeting with your legal team and talking about the kinds of things we need to do to make sure we properly document public input. And we have actually looked at some firms that specialize in receiving public input and categorizing it so that you can go back and research it. No decisions be made because, again, we need to see what the mappers can do, but we really want to be able to provide a good system to log and manage that. So we've done that. We've also worked with the legal staff so that they were able to start taking a look at the submissions to the Department of Justice last time so that they can do as much pre-work on that as possible. So we've done a lot of little things to try to move along and be ready so that once the mapper hits the ground, we'll be ready to go with them. And with that, that's all I have to report.
Well, Madam Chair, as a follow-up for that, then, as you're doing work with legal counsel, and I'm assuming that you're also trying to assemble, this may fall into the agenda items for the future meeting, but I'm assuming that you're trying to put together all of the previous meeting minutes, transcripts. There haven't been any distributed and or reviewed and or approved and put into the record for the last almost month and a half.
That, Chairman Mathis, Commissioner Sturts, we are way behind in that. We did add Anna Garcia to our staff last week, and that is one of the projects we're putting her on to get them categorized. We do now have a system with the legal team where this month Mary's staff reviews the minutes, and I think once, unless again I hear differently from you, once approved by legal, we'll go ahead and post them on our website. And we are having both transcripts and minutes taken. We're not paying extra to have the minutes done early because we do have the video of it. But yes, I'm very embarrassed that I'm that far behind in the minutes.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
Just for clarification on the minutes, they're being posted as draft minutes once legal has approved them, correct? Ultimately, the commission needs to approve them.
Correct, and we haven't posted them as draft yet, but I think that's what we need to do. Pardon me, thank you for correcting it. We would post them as draft after legal review, and then it would be your need to approve them. But we need to get the draft minutes on the agenda and then get them on to you for approval, and we are behind.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Bladine on the executive director report or the information he provided? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bladine, and thank you, Christina, for all your work too on the public hearing schedule. We will get to that at some point.
Well, then, Madam Chair, I'm going to
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and move that we move items number 4, 5, and 6 to a subsequent meeting agenda to be determined, in an effort to allow any of the members of the public that may be waiting here to see the mapping consultant, as this is an agenda item that there's going to be a presentation by the mapping consultant that they will not be here to make. So we can let the members of the public know that.
Right, the time has gotten late today, and we've decided that it would be best to postpone 4, 5, 6 on the agenda. So that will be at our next meeting, which right now is scheduled for July 7th. Again, a venue to be determined and time to be determined, but we'll get that information out as early as we can.
And Madam Chair, we have been trying to, if we know a meeting's coming up, even though we don't know location, at least put something on our website that gives some idea of when it might be, but we certainly will move as quickly as we can to get the official notice up so people have as much notice as possible.
Thank you, that's great. So I need a motion, I think, to table those items, of, if everyone agrees, of
I second the motion.
5, 6.
I think it was made already.
Oh, you made it, okay, second, sorry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will table those items until next time. And our next meeting, we just talked about any agenda items that anyone wanted to raise that should be on that next agenda?
4, 5, 6.
Yep. Besides 4, 5, and 6, any others?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Mr. Stewart.
I believe that it's incumbent for us to get our minutes up to speed. So whatever staff needs to do and legal needs to do to hit the gas to get that under control. We are about to go into hyper speed in regards to public meetings, and if we can't keep up with our own meetings, we need to instill a level of confidence in the public that we're going to be able to be delivering information and review back to the general public about what's happening out in the rest of the state.
Okay, good thought. Any other agenda items?
Madam Chairman, I
Mr.
think we
Bladine?
did also discuss on 7th or the 8th about having our legal team give us a briefing on those laws that pertain to redistricting so that you'd have that fresh in your mind. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, we'll be ready whenever the Commission wants to put that on their agenda. And we might coordinate on some issues with the mapping consultant, I think.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I think it would also be incumbent to have a revisiting of the open meeting law discussion. We had one briefly with Jim Barton at the beginning of our session, but it would be good, now that the majority of our team has been assembled and we've got new legal counsel, that we have another briefing in public of what the open meeting law, how it states, how it's organized, and what the processes are.
Yes, good idea. And yeah, especially now that we have the full team in place, that would be very helpful, I think, for everyone.
And just some clarification, who would be leading the discussion?
Well, in terms of open meeting law, I think it would be legal counsel. Mary, would you or Joe or both be doing that, or?
Yeah, Joe and I can work together to do whatever the Commission wants. I guess we'd need just a sense for how much time you'd want to spend on it, since this is the second time you'll have dealt with it. And I did think, also, we planned on briefing the mapping consultant, so they are up to speed on the legal requirements right from the beginning, both in terms of open meeting and public records laws.
Okay. Any other agenda items?
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
just to clarify that I think it would make more sense that if we have an open meeting law and go over the whole process, that the mapping consultants be included.
Yes,
Let's just
they
do that
would.
at one time.
Agreed.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, that was my intent.
Perfect.
Any other agenda items? Okay. Hearing none?
Madam Chair,
Yep.
I'm sorry, I do have one more. And this is a question for timing. What is the anticipated date of a draft contract with the mapping consultant going to be ready for distribution for for commission review?
I think that's for
The
Mr.
best I
Bladeen.
could tell you at this time, we intend, the legal counsel and myself intend to meet tomorrow on the phone with the consulting firm. We have talked to them. I'd like to tell you that we're going to get it done on Friday, but I do want to, as you've instructed, negotiate the fees. So it'll certainly be early next week, if not this Friday. But I think it's going to be very difficult to get it done Friday.
This Friday, meaning tomorrow?
That's correct. So, I mean, we actually started on it this morning about 5 o'clock to make the initial contact with them and talk to them about the fact that you had authorized me to enter into a contract and to negotiate the rate. And then yesterday we had a discussion with legal counsel about getting a draft contract. But I don't think we'll get it together tomorrow, but it will be early next week. And my anticipation with legal approval would be we'll go ahead and get the contract as quickly as we can, but allow for expenditures they may expend prior to the contract to come out here and do what we need to be done. Because I don't want to delay that, but I also want to make sure that I properly have an opportunity to see what we can do to better refine the costs.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Strick?
so what I'm hearing is that prior to the July 7th meeting, a draft agreement, as you just described, would be distributed to the commissioners?
That would be my plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mary, okay?
I guess
Mary?
for clarification, is it the commission's understanding and intention that that it would come back for commission approval again, or that the agreement can be executed? My understanding was that the executive director has authority to negotiate and and work with legal to get the agreement finalized and approved without further commission action, although we'll certainly keep the commission informed.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
My recollection of the vote yesterday was that Mr. Bladeen was authorized to enter into the contract. But perhaps, since our agenda item concerns future agenda items, that we make a sort of contract review, an agenda item. Perhaps there might be a modification that the commission might want to consider. Because we're basically, the authority has been given by the vote yesterday, but none of us will see the final product. And perhaps it's irrelevant, but I would at least like to have the opportunity to review it and perhaps comment upon it. Does that make sense? Is that?
So, yes, and I'll just, I guess the executive director has the authority to execute the agreement, but you just want to make sure that you're aware of what the final product is, right?
Right.
So we may execute before the next.
Well, I think that's what the vote gave him the authority.
That's my understanding
That's
as well.
my recollection of it. So I guess I would like an agenda item whereby if I feel there's an appropriate amendment to ask for or modification to propose, that we be given that, and I don't know what that might be, but at least it gives me an opportunity to take a look at the contract with that sort of thing in mind.
Okay, and maybe we can follow up to make sure the intention, because typically once we wouldn't have modifications that quickly after execution is my concern in terms of an agenda action item. But can work with the commission in terms of making sure that the commissioners are informed, and then if it needs to be an agenda item before the commission, before next time.
Is it possible to circulate the draft contract, or would that work in terms of letting commissioners review it, or is that not?
Madam Chairman, I think
Mr. Bladeen.
we have some work to do to figure out legally what do we need to do, because we're under delegated authority with SPO, even though we also have our constitutional right. So I'm trying to, right quickly learn again how we should do this to be consistent with SPO and with the legal counsel. So I'm not sure that it would be appropriate for us to circulate it, but it would certainly be something that we could bring to you in probably an executive session, but we just need to think it out. And as I'm sitting here, I think it's going to be difficult to get all these I's dotted and T's crossed by the 7th. I really need to know how we're going to do this. We're in completely uncharted territory of having started a process, being delegated by SPO, and having constitutional authority. And the attorneys are really going to have to help us sort through how to do that so that we have done it properly.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bladine, Council, I think our vote was that Mr. Bladine had the authority, he was directed to enter into negotiation with the consultant and contract with the consultant. And I would suggest that we add as an agenda item for the next time an update on that status. And if at that point we think any further agenda items are appropriate, that we add them. I don't think we have as an agenda item right now to discuss the details of that particular endeavor. So I'd suggest that we put on the agenda for next time the status of Mr. Bladine's progress.
Okay. That's fine.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Bladine, you mentioned the complexities of the SPO delegation to the Commission. Could you describe the complexities?
Madam Chair, I don't think that's an agenda item today, is it? I don't think that's on our agenda.
That's
not specifically.
That's a good point. He can give a summary of current events, and I guess the current event is that he's working with the mapping consultant to follow up on the Commission's direction from yesterday.
And I guess I could give you an update that having talked to the consultant, I have also reviewed what was done last time. I pulled out the contract, and even though SPO didn't negotiate last time, they did issue the contract. And I want to make sure that if I sign a contract under that delegation that I'm doing it properly. And right now I don't know what that means.
So, okay, Madam Chair, so we'll continue working with Mr. Bladine to get that,
to nail it down.
move it forward, and then if there's an agenda item next week, update the Commission on the status. And keep you informed on the drafts so that if there's need, so that we satisfy the Commission's need for information on this issue.
Sounds great.
I had one other agenda point, if I may.
Sure, Mary.
On Roman numeral 5 that we are carrying over, which is the presentation from the mapping consultant, it might help if there are specific issues that they want to cover in the mapping consultant's presentation to identify, that the commissioners want to hear, to identify those so that can be specified in the agenda.
Madam Chair?
Okay, Mr. Herrera?
I think it would make sense if the mapping consultant goes from step one. There'll be people in the audience that probably may not understand some of the things, even myself. So I think it would make sense if just lay the groundwork, the whole process, to give everybody a good understanding, a good foundation of how the process will begin and then progress.
Yep, that's a good idea, a step-by-step outline of
Sure.
the entire process. Okay. Anything else that the commissioners want to say about what should be specified under the mapping consultant presentation? Anything specific?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Just one more thing, the issue of public comment, I would like for the mapping consultant to definitely focus on that and to, I don't want to say reassure, but to let the public know that their comments are going to be recorded, or whether it be that their comments and also their maps, so just the whole process of how that happens.
Okay. Any other comments from other commissioners? Okay. Hearing none, that concludes agenda item 7, which takes us to agenda item 8, which is adjournment. And the time is now 4:40 p.m., and I declare this meeting adjourned.